Hey folks, John Cantera, the Double Broker Bounty Hunter here, and we have a live version um, of our series that we're posting for you today. Didn't get the chance to record it earlier, so I figured I'd go ahead and do it live. Plus, we are seeing more people engaging and asking questions when we do it live. So we're going to try to do this live more often. But today we're going to be doing part 12 of our series and talking about vetting services, the pros and the cons, and what you need to do to get things fixed when things aren't exactly right. So if you have issues like that, this is a great episode for you to pay attention to. But before we get to it, we do have some words from our sponsors at Acubid Pro.
Do you know your cost per mile? Have you been hitting your profit margins? Do you struggle with bidding in a way that is both profitable and competitive? Would it be worth it to have all this information right in front of you? By calculating your cost per mile, Acubid Pro helps you stay profitable in an industry still struggling to recover. In order to calculate your cost per mile, Acubid Pro asks you questions about your business expenses. Our goal is to help you understand what you need to keep operating in order to keep up with the game and maintain your business. Enter your origin and destination, and we show you what you should bid based on your personal cost per mile in order to be profitable, even including a more detailed breakdown of each bid. Download the app today and get your 30-day free trial of Acubid Pro, available on the App Store and Google Play. Bid smarter, bid faster, bid better with Acubid Pro.
So I'm still kind of in the middle of my dispatching day. So if there appears to be any kind of breaks or something, it's only because I'm looking at my phone real quick while I'm trying to get more loads covered. But if you have any questions, please feel free to put them up in the comment section, and I'll get to them as they come up as quickly as I can. Again, we're talking about vetting platforms today, and many of you have seen the different vetting platforms that are out there. My personal favorite is My Carrier Portal with Descartes. It just has so much functionality for brokers. It's got a lot of different integrated tools in it, not least of which MacroPoint. It also has integration with Freight Validate. I think it's a really great tool if you're a broker. I also think it's a great tool if you're a dispatcher or a carrier, because doing a setup in MCP takes like seconds. In fact, I was talking with a friend of mine at MCP, and we're both going to be at Matt's coming up here at the end of March. And we're going to do a setup race at some point. We're trying to figure this out to see who can get through an MPC setup the fastest. I know my time is currently around 30 seconds. It all depends on my internet connection. So it's going to be fun to watch. But anyway, love MCP. It's a good process for both brokers and carriers to deal with. Truck stop's a little more cumbersome. That's the RMIS. But they provide a lot of the same tools, screening, setup, and tracking. They have trucker tools. There's a lot of different functionality that's involved there. And that's why, for the most part, you see MCP and RMIS if you're out there as a dispatcher or carrier when you're asked to do a setup. Highway is getting to be a very big one. We did a show on Highway a few weeks ago on our live show, Stop the Scam. And Highway talked a lot about their platform and how they kind of grew in prominence, and they continue to grow today. So they are going to be major players. That is something we have to deal with, especially some of the different things that are in there that people don't really like so much, like the ELD connection. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. DAT is another one. It used to be far more common, but with the strength and the quality that you get out of MCP, RMIS, and Highway, DAT has really fallen off the stage when it comes to providing setup services. Carrier 411, they're also a great screening tool, but that's all they do right now. is just screening. Now, we do know after interviews that we've had with Darren Brewer, the owner of Carrier 411, that they are going to be launching sometime very soon an updated version of Carrier 411. And that updated version is going to have a setup utility built into it that subscribers can direct carriers to in order to run setups. So that is new and coming. Also, for carriers out there, we all know that Carrier 411 has no love for carriers whatsoever, but they are trying to show some level of love by creating a new platform that they're calling Carrier 511. At least we're assuming it's going to be Carrier 511 because Darren Brewer owns that domain as well. So Carrier 511 is supposed to be geared towards carriers and them being able to file reports against brokers, as well as being able to review their own profile as it shows up in Carrier 411. So lots of changes coming soon with Carrier 411, but Carrier 411 is something that is regularly used for screening carriers. Other tools that are used for screening include Carrier Assure, Safer, Carrier OK, and Freight Validate. Now, these last four do allow carriers to subscribe to be able to get their own profiles and to see what they have in their profiles. Some of them have free versions, which will at least allow you to access basic information, but it won't tell you why you have a certain rating, such as Carrier Assure. They're like that. One of the big issues I have with these services is they are not always forthcoming with telling carriers why they are rated the way they are, or what the issues are, etc. You usually have to get that from a broker. Now, there's some reasons for this, but then again, there are also reasons that are completely unknown. Well, I'll get more into reputation management in a little bit, because reputation management is a big part of that. So what's involved in vetting a carrier from the broker side? You brokers out there, please correct me if any of this is wrong. Throw it in the comments. Be happy to throw that up on the screen. The big four: authority, insurance, W-9, and a notice of assignment for your factoring company. Those are the big four things that are needed when you're vetting carriers, because a lot of the information that is needed is right there. Now, in this day and age, with all the fraud that's in the industry, they've thrown a lot more on top of it. You see an emphasis on safety scores that are out there. You see a greater emphasis on whether or not somebody has roadside inspections. I'm going to caveat the whole roadside inspection things right now. It's 2 years ago, the thought of utilizing a roadside inspection as proof that equipment exists was a good idea. I think Tim Bannon at the Bannon Report was the one who originally got that out there on social media, and everyone started following it. I could be wrong on that. However, ever since June of last year, DOT got the directive out to all the scale houses and all highway patrol that you can't just stop and ask for an inspection anymore. So no voluntary inspections, which means if a broker requires an inspection, then the only way to get the inspection is to be observed doing something unsafe. And that is a huge problem, because Safer only has 2 years worth of inspection reports on file. So if we get past 24 months since your last inspection, then you're going to be showing no inspection reports, even though you have a safety score. Go figure. But the fact that you're not showing any inspection reports, it ends up shutting you down with some of these brokers. So in about 6 months from now, about 90% of the carriers that have inspection reports on file are because they've been observed doing something wrong. So eventually, you brokers out there, you need to talk to your compliance people, and you need to change that criteria. Inspection reports is not a viable criteria anymore. There are other ways to sit there and prove equipment, but inspections, not so good anymore. But it is out there, and carriers do need to worry about it. A better one is VIN verification. Highway does this pretty extensively. I believe all the platforms do. I just happen to have more knowledge of how Highway works. But VIN verification is very important. They're going to match a VIN number that your driver may report to the broker to the COI to make sure that that matches. As long as your VIN number appears on the COI, that usually is a good thing, because that means the cargo is going to be covered, the equipment's going to be covered, and life's good. If that's not on there, then it's a huge liability fiasco. No wonder brokers aren't going to use you. So make sure you keep your VINs up to date, especially if you're one of those carriers who leases equipment. I know when I was a carrier, I used to lease equipment, and when I turned it in to get it serviced, I would often get a different piece back so that I can keep running. And if that's the case, you have to update your COI immediately to include the VIN number of the other vehicle. That way, everything is still covered and protected. Another way to vet carriers is through tracking. That is why you see a lot of requests by brokers. Hey, do you have MacroPoint downloaded? Do you have Trucker Tools downloaded? Turvo, all those other systems that are out there. But they definitely want tracking. I know if you're a dispatcher out there, okay, and you don't want to spend money on a tracking platform, Life 360 is very good. It is free. It links to the driver's cell phone, and if you dispatch for multiple carriers like I do, then you can set up different circles, and then you can identify each MC as its own circle, and then all the drivers under that MC can be seen on the same screen. Really nice stuff. And I can send a link of it to a broker if I need to, so a broker can see that as a secondary tracking source, so my carriers don't get accused of just turning off their tracking. It really does help. ELD connection is a huge one, and Highway started this. However, we are seeing this more and more. We know that through MCP and Descartes, they want to start seeing ELD connections in order for MacroPoint to work better. So MacroPoint has an ELD integration in it. You also have ELD integration in Project 44. Some of you have heard of that. Perhaps some of you newer guys haven't. Project 44 is yet another tracking tool. But an ELD connection is something that, guys, I'm sorry, it's not going away. We all know ELDs are mandatory, and ELDs have the capability to access GPS. Therefore, brokers are going to want to use it to be able to track you. That's all there is to it. Now, the good news is that brokers only utilize the tracking when you're active on a load. If you're not active on a load at that time, they're usually not looking at the tracking. So I wouldn't sweat it too much from a standpoint of privacy. However, it is something that needs to be done. Now, there is a lot of conspiracy theories flying around about these ELD connections, such as Highway is sitting there selling off ELD connections to brokers everywhere, so the brokers can be engaged in price fixing depending on the number of ELDs in a given market. Guys, it is not like that, okay? We had an executive on from Highway who sat there on the record on our show to tell us, no, that's not the case. I also happen to know of several brokers who use Highway who, when they pull up an MC, they can see where the connected ELDs are for that MC, but they can't overlay that on a national map to see where all the others are too. They don't have that capability. And lastly, reputation. Carriers, if you got a bad reputation, it's going to come out, whether that's on Carrier 411, a watchdog report, Google, whatever. But those bad reports are going to catch up to you and cause you to lose business. But these are the kinds of things that brokers are looking for when they're vetting carriers. So you need to make sure that all your information is good. We'll get more into the information in a second. Because carriers, you should also be vetting your brokers. I I've been doing the fraud prevention thing for several years now. And if it's one thing I've learned is by percentage of active authorities, there are more bad brokers than there are bad carriers. And that's by percentage. Okay. So it's very important that carriers vet the brokers that they actually use as well. So what's involved in vetting a broker? Well, a broker, when you're doing an initial setup, should provide you with an authority certificate, should provide you with proof of insurance. And we're talking about the surety bond that they have, because they're required to have a surety bond of a minimum 75,000. Remember that. What kind of payment system they have, whether they allow quick pay, if they're factorable, if you have to invoice them direct on 30-day terms, et cetera, et cetera. These are all kinds of things that I'm looking at when I'm trying to set up a carrier with a broker. I'm looking at credit scores. I want to make sure that they've got good credit, because I want to make sure my carrier is going to get paid. What setup platform do they use? I've got my preferences. I know that one of my carriers has an issue on highway that we're still working to get fixed. So if I'm booking a load for them and the broker tells me that they use highway, I'm probably going to go ahead and opt out of the load. So I always am asking, what setup platform do you use? Broker reputations. If you have the time, I try to look at a broker reputation if you've never worked with them before. You want to Google search them. You want to take a look in DAT or Truck Stop, because brokers have reviews listed in there as well. And is that somebody you want to work with? Now, remember something, and that's whether you're a broker or a carrier and you're looking at reviews, most people only issue reviews when they're having a really bad day. So a lot of them are bad reviews. Filter through them. Now, I will tell you that every review I've ever read has had a grain of truth in it. It may only be a single grain, but there is a grain of truth in it. So you need to pay attention to what's in there, and is it something of substance that causes you concern? And then feel free to ask the broker or the carrier questions about it. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, everyone has a bad day. It just, is the bad day worthy of getting a bad report on top of it? I also stop to review the contract whenever possible. Now, I do a lot of hot shots and box trucks. So everything I do is super time sensitive and super fast. I have to get it done like yesterday. So I do go through contracts very quickly, but there are certain things that I look for in every contract. I look for payment terms. I look for things like accessorial costs and how that's handled. I also look for whether or not they force a waiver of 49 CFR 371.3. That's the broker transparency law. Do they have a waiver in there for that? Most of them do. It's not a deal breaker, but I like to know what I'm getting into before I commit a carrier to a contract. And lastly, load verification. And I do this after I book a load. When I book a load with a broker, a medium or large broker, I will call their corporate office and verify the load ID number and lane to make sure the load is real. If they're a small broker, then I call the brokerage back and I try to speak to somebody other than the guy that I just booked the load with to, again, verify the load. And if that's not possible, because the broker may be a one-man band, I'm looking at you, Sage. If you're a one-man band, then you have the right to call the shipper and say, hey, can you please verify who the broker is for this load? There is nothing wrong with asking that. But if you're going to call a shipper and verify a broker, never, ever, ever, ever talk about money. That crosses a line. It looks like Sage heard that. I knew you were paying attention, Sage. It's okay to talk to a shipper, but do not talk money. That does cross the line into back solicitation, and that can have horrible ramifications for a carrier when you do that. So carriers, it is very important that you do vet your brokers. These are the steps that I use. If you've got other things that you do, please share that in the comments. We would appreciate that. But if you don't vet your broker, you could be going down a bad street. There are a lot of times that brokers are being impersonated. You want to make sure you're not pulling one of those impersonated loads because it means you're not going to get paid. Now, I have a lot of carriers calling me saying, hey, there are problems with my information on a given platform, whether it's Carrier 411, even in Safer. If the information is wrong, you need to know how to go about fixing it. I've read on Reddit several times in the last week, people complaining about their information being wrong, and they call somebody like Highway and say, hey, the information's wrong, you need to fix it. And they're like, well, we can't, there's a process for doing that. And then the carrier gets all upset, starts threatening a lawsuit and all that stuff. Guys, that's crazy. Okay. Know the source of the data that these platforms are pulling from. Like, we know that Carrier 411, Highway, MCP, etc., they all pull off of Safer for one thing, but then they're also all pulling off of MCMIS for safety data. We know that they're pulling off of different types of platforms that may have subjective data involved in there to help determine whether or not a carrier would be successful. That's predictive analytics. We know that stuff's out there. Well, if there's bad information somewhere in there, you need to know where to go to fix it so that you don't have any more problems. Because just sitting there cussing out and threatening somebody at Highway is not going to get you anywhere. It just doesn't happen. Know where you need to go. So what we're really looking at is how to fix the data that's out there. If you have an insurance issue that needs to get fixed, maybe your COI needs to be updated, or the VIN number on a COI that is being stored in RMIS is incorrect. It takes about 30 to 60 minutes to get a COI. And that's assuming you're calling your agent and you're having them generate a new COI. But usually those COIs have to be emailed into those services by your agent or by the insurance company. As a dispatcher or a carrier, you can't just email them, hey, here's a new COI, because there's a lot of carriers and dispatchers who've been falsifying COIs. So it doesn't work. You got to get your insurance agent to do it. And once it finally gets there, it may take time for the platforms to update the COI information, such as Highway. Highway usually takes a couple of hours. I've seen Highway take as long as 24 hours to get an update through their system. It all depends on how busy they are that day. But all these emails, they're going into a central office, and then somebody's grabbing the email and processing it as they go. I mean, I don't know if that's a minimum wage person sitting there inputting the information, but they're not exactly the fastest people in the world. But you've got 300,000 other carriers sending COIs in, so they've got their work cut out for them. Now, if you have to get an update in your FMCSA data, and the only way you would need to do that is if you've changed something in your FMCSA data, or if your data has been compromised by a scammer and they hacked your FMCSA account. To get those changes done, you file an updated MCS 150 through the Safer website, and that could take anywhere from 1 to 5 days to get that done. Now, if you're in a situation where you've been impersonated by a scammer, you can reach out to me. I've got direct connections with the registration team over at FMCSA, and we can get corrections done more quickly on an emergency basis. But you got to reach out to me to get stuff like that done. If you have to get an update to your safety information, now all this is automated, the safety information, because it's all fed by state DOT. Whenever they pull you over and you get an inspection or something, all that information automatically gets fed in there. So I have a carrier who for 1.5 years didn't get an inspection. They finally got one, and they're so happy because it was a flawless inspection. Everything was great. They got it on January 7th. They were happy as hell. They thought, all right, it's going to be a great year. We've got an inspection. It open up a lot of doors. Yeah, that's great. It didn't get turned in by Texas DOT to the Fed until the 12th. But that was after the day that MCMIS updates, because MCMIS updates only once per month, and it usually takes place somewhere between the 10th and the 12th. Once that updates, well, it's another 30 days before we see anything. So that January 7 inspection didn't get turned in until the 12th. So it didn't show up in the carrier's profiles on the vetting services until mid-February, a couple weeks ago. So they've only, brokers are just now seeing, oh, now you've got an inspection. So as frustrating as that is, if I didn't already know MCMIS updated on only a monthly basis and not an hourly or daily basis, then I'd really be not beating people's doors down, trying to wonder, why is my information not updating? Why is it happening? Well, that's why. It only updates once a month. And knowing that can help prepare you for extra stuff that you may encounter along the way, carriers, especially if you're waiting on that little inspection to show up in that report. Now, updates for the screening services themselves vary. Some screening services update their data every usually couple of hours, sometimes once a day, sometimes once a week. It all depends on which service you're talking about. The most frequent that I've heard is every couple of hours on Freight Validate. So Freight Validate's information is usually pretty darn tight. Just throwing that out there. But those of you who watch me on a regular basis, you know that I'm a huge fan of Freight Validate. And no, they're not a sponsor. Reputation management. This is the fun one. Whenever you get a bad review, okay, it's not just Carrier 411 and Freight Guards. We all know about that. I've talked ad nauseum about Freight Guards before. You need to be looking at the other services. Highway is a big one. A lot of brokers are starting to post reports in Highway when there's an issue. The problem with reports in Highway, RMIS, and MCP is that you don't always know who submitted the review, especially if it is the result of, say, a double broker situation where the carrier was impersonated. All the carrier is going to know is they're trying to book a load through Highway, and the broker says, oh, Highway says that you've got a report for double brokering, so we can't use you. And the carrier's like, we didn't double broker anything. What the hell are you talking about? So they're going to try to call Highway. And Highway's going to sit there and say, yeah, you have a report for double brokering, but we can't tell you who it is, who's filed the report. What do you mean you can't tell me who filed the report? It's the way Highway system is set up. Highway system is set so that if you go to contest a report, and this is true with RMIS and MCP as well, if you go to contest a report, there's a little button there that allows the broker to send a question to whoever it is that filed the report. But that button does not reveal what brokerage filed the report against the carrier. The security team at Highway, they know just because they can see the underlying code, but they are also hesitant to say who the broker is. Now, I've had to work several cases before where a carrier was impersonated and was accused of double brokering through the impersonation event. And I've had to prove a lot of things to Highway, but they ended up taking our evidence and then presenting that to the broker. And in some cases, we're able to fix it. In some cases, we're not. In some cases, if it's absolutely obvious to Highway, Highway may pull the report down themselves. Highway also is very sensitive about connections. If you are associated with another carrier that has a bad report, then you can get a bad report on you as well. For example, me, I'm a dispatcher. I am listed on, I kid you not, 17 carrier profiles in Highway. So these 17 profiles, you know, most of them are inactive. Most of them have gotten out of the business and sold their trucks. There are only 6 of them that are active right now. But if any of them were accused of double brokering, all 17 would get accused of double brokering because I am a common thread for all of them, and I could possibly be the reason why a double brokering accusation took place. So it's very important that if you're a carrier, know who is listed on your profile, whose contact information is there, and make sure you trust them implicitly, because if they screw somebody else up and they're listed on your profile too, it can come back to haunt you as an association. Associations are so much easier to work with when it comes to highway and their security department. I've got a good rapport with them. We investigate it thoroughly, and if we can prove it's only an association and the carrier has absolutely nothing to do with the event, then we can usually help get that fixed. But if you ever have a situation you need to contest with highway, RMIS, MCP, I have the emails on the screen as to where you're supposed to send your response to. If you are going to contest a review, come with evidence. Don't just say the guy's a effing liar. That does nothing. Say, we're not guilty of double brokering. This is the situation. This is the event that took place. Maybe it's an owner operator situation that was not very clear. Here's a copy of the owner operator's contract. Here's a copy of the COI with a VIN number. Provide the information. Provide as much information as possible, because that's going to help clear your name if you've got a bad review under these systems. And please, guys, be polite. Sitting there yelling at somebody, even on email, calling them names and stuff, making counter accusations, it does not do you any good. It does not give you any credit. Be smart about how you're presenting yourself. When it comes to Carrier 411, we all know all bets are freaking off on that platform. If you're a carrier, you only get 500 characters, including spaces, to issue a response to a freight guard. And let me tell you something, it takes a lot of time and skill to craft a good response in just 500 characters, depending on the accusation. I get hired to write those responses from time to time, and sometimes the carrier can get away from the accusation, sometimes not. I can tell you that if you are looking for reputation management help from me, when you reach out to me, I will investigate you. I will investigate the situation. If you are in fact guilty, don't call me. Because if you're guilty, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to report you to FMCSA so that they can start an investigation on you themselves. I don't support scammers, and I'm not out there to clean up their junk. Okay, just throwing that out there. You don't become known as the double broker bounty hunter if you're out there supporting scammers. You lose all credibility. Just anyway. If you run into these kinds of issues and you need help dealing with setups or dealing with these vetting platforms, give me a shout. I am the Double Broker Bounty Hunter. You can email me, jcantera, vigilanttransport.com, or give me a call. I'm happy to help you in any way I can. I will tell you that we typically have representatives from the vetting platforms on our live show on Monday called Stop the Scam. We bring them on every few weeks, at least once a month, just so that people can ask questions and get things done. Okay. Costas has a question here. So data that all these vetting platforms are pulling, is there a concern if anyone gets them breached? This data is different, personal biometric. Yeah. You do have to make sure your information is protected. The good thing is the data sources are what's actually getting hacked. So if the information is wrong in highway, then it's the source you need to deal with. In most cases, it's safer. If a scammer can get a carrier's DOT PIN number or a broker's DOT PIN number, they can go in and make changes in safer. So if your safer information changes, yeah, you've been hacked. You need to go in and file an updated MCS 150, contact FMCSA, make sure they're aware. You can contact me and I'll reach out to my direct contacts on the registration team, and we can try to get those corrected very quickly. But the sooner or the longer you wait in trying to identify that you've been breached in Safer, means there's more loads out there that's being double brokered. I have had a carrier who had their authority pirated through Safer once before. We discovered it about 2 hours after it took place. And we got it corrected with FMCSA very quickly. But in the total of 6 hours that the information was wrong, we had at least 22 attempted bookings through the different vetting services that I'd mentioned before. And we managed to stop all but 5 from getting loaded. The 5 that got loaded, we were able to make contact with the real carrier so the real carrier can figure out who the real broker was. So everyone who hauled a scam load from that attack ended up getting paid. But the sooner you act, the better for everyone. Thanks for bringing that up. Again, if you need something, just hit me. What you got here? Just concerned. Some of them claim they've been using over 400 data points. That's more than, yes, it is much more than Safer. And none of these guys are going to tell you where the source information is for all these different data points. They are pulling from a lot of different places. Like I said, it's called predictive algorithms that they use. And they use these to basically try to figure out, is this carrier going to be effective in doing a load? I'm not a big fan of the predictive analytics because they're flawed. It uses supposition. It's subjective. There's no concrete facts as to what they're doing. It's all based on an algorithm. That's why I talk a lot about Freight Validate, because Freight Validate is all facts. Basically, the only thing Freight Validate says is whether or not a carrier or a broker is 100% in viable when it comes to the law. You know, do they meet all the requirements under the law, such as, are they operating out of a PO box? If they're operating out of a PO box, then they're not in compliance. Therefore, they're going to have a red X. It's cut and dry. There's no predictive. There's no assumptions. It's cut and dry. So that's one of the reasons why I like that platform so much. But that's neither here nor there. But it's also a great investigative tool for the things that I do. If there aren't any other questions, I've had you guys for about 40 minutes now. Feel free to post more comments. I will get to them when I can. Reach out to me if you ever have any problems. As a programming note, we do have on our Monday show this week, it's another broker trying to call me. On our Monday show this week, we have Wendy Buckley of Stars Hazmat coming on to talk about hazmat and fraud within the industry. She's also an expert in compliance. So we're going to be asking her a few questions about some of the data sources that exist out there for these vetting tools. So a lot going on with Wendy. Be sure to check her out when she comes onto our show on Monday, 5 p.m. Central. If there is nothing else, folks, try to have a great week out there. Stay safe. And whatever you do, don't let scammers take you for a ride. We'll catch you on Monday.